The monitors were screaming. That rhythmic digital chirping that usually signifies the steady pulse of life had suddenly transformed into the frantic sound of a countdown. I was a doctor, a man of clinical precision, a product of elite academic medical schools where God was treated as a psychological crutch for the weak-minded. I believed in what I could see, what I could cut with a scalpel, and what I could measure in a lab. To me, the universe was a cold machine of cause and effect, and I was one of its master mechanics. I had money, I had a burgeoning reputation as an ophthalmologist, and I had the ultimate arrogance of a man who believed he was in total control of his destiny. But standing there in that sterile, white-walled room, looking at my newborn daughter, Hannah, I realized my science was a hollow god. She wasn't just pale, she was a haunting, dusky blue, a shade of cyanosis, so deep it was darker than the surgical scrubs I had worn with such professional pride for years. Her aorta was crushed, a congenital defect that was effectively strangling her life at the source. Oxygen, the very essence of life, could not reach her lower body. Her tissues were dying. My child was suffocating in my presence. And for the first time in my life, I was utterly, terrifyingly powerless. In the world I lived in, if you wanted something, you worked harder. If you needed money, you saw more patients. Everything was transactional. But there in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, there was no transaction that could buy back her breath. When the senior surgeons gently but firmly pushed me out of the room so they could perform their grim assessments, I didn't go to the doctor's lounge. I didn't go to the library to research protocols. I ran. I ran until I hit the heavy doors of the hospital prayer room. I collapsed onto the floor. I didn't even know how to pray. I had spent my life intellectualizing away the existence of a creator, yet here I was, broken. I offered a desperate, raw, and perhaps the most honest contract ever whispered in that room. I said, "Oh God, if you are there, I need help. I cannot do this. If you save my daughter, and if you guide me to the religion that is most pleasing to you, not the one that is easy for me, but the one you desire, then I promise I will follow." It was a skeptic's prayer, a last-ditch effort from a drowning man. I stayed there for 15 minutes, a fraction of time that felt like a century. When I walked back toward the NICU, I was preparing myself to hear the time of death. I began the ritual of scrubbing in, washing my hands, donning the mask, the gown, the gloves. Through the glass window, I saw the team of specialists huddled around Hannah's incubator. They looked up and saw me, and the expression on their faces wasn't pity, it was shock. I stepped into the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon turned to me, shaking his head. "She's going to be fine," he whispered. "The obstruction, it's gone. It's as if it was never there." No surgery was needed, no high-dose interventions, just a sudden, inexplicable restoration of life. To the medical team, it was a spontaneous resolution, a statistical anomaly. But I knew I had signed a contract in that prayer room, and the other party had just fulfilled his side of the deal. The next 4 years were a psychological trauma of a different kind. I was a man of my word, but I was lost. I had promised to follow the religion most pleasing to God, but which one was it? I began a frantic academic search. I studied Taoism, but it felt like philosophy without a soul. I looked into Buddhism and Hinduism, but the deeper I went, the more I felt I was drifting away from the oneness I had sensed in that prayer room. Finally, I did what most Westerners do. I picked up the Bible. I read the Old Testament and felt a connection to the prophets. But when I reached the New Testament, the math of my medical brain began to clash with the theology. I searched for the place where Jesus claimed divinity, but instead I found him calling himself the Son of Man 88 times. I asked priests and ministers, "Why do you call him God when he calls himself a servant?" They told me it was a mystery. They told me to stop thinking and just believe. But as a doctor, just believe without evidence is how patients die. I needed the truth. I felt like I was holding a massive 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and the most critical pieces, the ones that showed the face of the truth, were missing. I was frustrated, bordering on despair. I had made a promise to the being who saved my daughter, and I felt like I was failing him. Then my brother intervened. We were never close. In fact, we were opposites in almost every way. He had become a Muslim a year prior, a fact I had dismissed as a strange phase. But he sent me two things: a translation of the meanings of the Quran and a biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, by Martin Lings. I remember the night I started reading. I wasn't looking for a religion, I was looking for the missing pieces. And then it happened. The click. It wasn't a subtle sound, it was a psychological thunderclap. As I read the Quran, the verses didn't feel like they were written by a man in a desert 1,400 years ago. They felt like they were written by the one who had been watching me in that prayer room. The absolute oneness of God, Tawheed. The clear chain of prophethood from Adam to Noah, Abraham to Moses, Jesus to Muhammad. The logic was piercing. The evidence was undeniable. I realized that Islam wasn't a new religion. It was the final perfected chapter of the same story I had been reading in the Bible. It was the third prophet promised in the scriptures. It was the Parakletos. For the first time in my life, the puzzle was complete. I had found the religion most pleasing to him. I took my Shahada, the testimony of faith, thinking that the hardest part of my journey was over. I thought that since I had found the truth, the world would celebrate with me. I was wrong. I had no idea that by saving my daughter's life through that prayer, I was about to lose everything else I held dear. The real jihad was only just beginning. Taking the Shahada was the most peaceful moment of my life, but the silence that followed was the sound of my old world collapsing. I had naively thought that truth would be recognized by those who loved me. Instead, my faith acted like a mirror that my colleagues and family refused to look into. The intellectual elite of San Francisco, who prided themselves on tolerance, suddenly became the most intolerant people I had ever known. My wife of 14 years looked at me not as the man who had stayed by her side through our daughter's crisis, but as a stranger who had betrayed our social contract. She filed for divorce. I remember the coldness of the courtroom. The legal system didn't see a successful ophthalmologist or a devoted father. It saw a religious extremist. Because I had chosen Islam, the judge decided I was a threat. An injunction was placed upon me. I was forbidden from going within 100 feet of my own home, my own wife, and my own children. The humiliation was surgical. To see my daughters, the court mandated that I hire a professional bodyguard. Imagine that, a father with no history of violence, no record of abuse, forced to pay a stranger to watch him play with his own children in a public park, just to ensure he didn't infect them with his faith. I walked away from that marriage with nothing. My house, my cars, and a $250,000 art collection, all of it vanished. I left with an SUV and $5,000. I went from the pinnacle of the American dream to a man who owned nothing but his prayer mat. Then came the letter from my parents. It was a spiritual amputation. Don't call, don't visit, you are disowned. They stripped me of my inheritance and my place in the family. I was a ghost in my own city. But as the world closed its doors, a different door began to open in my soul. One night, in the depths of this isolation, I had a dream. It was more vivid than any waking memory. I was in the presence of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We were in a setting that felt strangely familiar yet distant, an old-style wooden town. He didn't speak in riddles. He pointed toward a range of jagged, majestic mountains and said, "Go to the mountains. Go to the people of the mountains, for there is jihad, struggle there." In the dream, I felt the weight of my reality. I said to him, "But our time is not like yours. If I go, who will protect my wife and child?" The Prophet, peace be upon him, looked at me with a gaze that felt like a shield and said, "I will take care of your wife and child." He then handed me 2 large glass jars, the kind you'd see in an old candy shop, filled with round, colorful sweets. "Take these to the people of the mountains," he instructed. Shortly after, a job offer arrived from Saudi Arabia. I took it as a sign and moved to Medina. For years, I lived in the shadow of the Prophet's mosque, working as a surgeon, but I never forgot the dream. One afternoon, 26 years later, I was standing on my balcony in Medina. The sun was setting, and the light hit the peaks of Mount Uhud in a way I had never noticed before. My heart stopped. The jagged edges, the red hue, the imposing silhouette. These were the mountains from my dream. I wasn't just in a city. I was exactly where I was promised I would be. I was with the people of the mountains, but the most incredible part of the promise was yet to be fulfilled. My daughter Hannah, the child who started this entire journey, grew up and had to return to the United States for university. My wife went with her to help her navigate a society that had become increasingly hostile to Muslims. I stayed in Medina, paralyzed by fear for their safety. While in America, my wife struggled. She was a Palestinian woman in a hijab, navigating a world of Uber rides and strangers, constantly feeling vulnerable. One morning she called me, her voice trembling with emotion. She had her own dream. She saw herself trying to get into an Uber, and the driver got out to open the door for her with a level of grace and nobility she had never seen. When she looked at the driver's face, she realized it was the prophet, peace be upon him, himself. "Your dream has been fulfilled," she told me through tears. The promise made to me nearly 3 decades prior, that my family would be protected in my absence, was being kept by the creator of the heavens and the earth. Today, as an ophthalmologist, people ask me about the complexity of the eye, the way the lens focuses light on the retina, the way the optic nerve carries signals to the brain. Yes, it is a masterpiece of biological engineering, but I tell them that the most fascinating thing isn't the eye, it's the ruh, the soul that looks through it. Atheism tries to explain life as a chemical accident, a Frankenstein spark of electricity in a primordial soup. But science can never explain why that spark becomes a soul. It can never explain the skeptic's prayer that was answered in 15 minutes. It can never explain how a man can lose his wealth, his family, and his reputation, yet feel more successful than he ever did as a millionaire. I lost my parents' inheritance, but I gained something better. Before they passed away, despite the years of silence, both my mother and my father contacted me. They saw the consistency of my character. They saw that Islam hadn't made me a stranger, it had made me a better son. One by one, they both took their shahada and died as Muslims. My journey from a San Francisco medical school to the mountains of Medina wasn't a journey of losing control. It was a journey of realizing I never had it to begin with. I am Dr. Laurence Brown, not just a surgeon,